everybody. It's Stephen Donziger here with a very, very, very special guest who has a very complicated name to pronounce. It's Saikat Chakrabarti.
Chakrabarti, yeah. My parents
Chakrabarti.
didn't think I was going to run for office when they named me, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
sorry about
Well, but hey, they're going to remember this name. It's unique. Saikat. Okay. I'm so happy to have you. Let me explain who Saikat is for those who don't know. He has a hell of a history. He was involved in the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. He helped found Justice Democrats. He got involved with AOC very early, helped recruit her to be a candidate. As you know, AOC won, and then Shoykot became, I believe you were her AOC's chief of staff. You helped conceptualize and write the Green New Deal, that fabulous plan that AOC presented right when she entered the Congress, along with Ed Markey and others. And now, this is the best part. Shoykot is running to become a member of Congress himself against none other than Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. Okay. So here you have this great race, which is the younger generation against the establishment that I think is largely responsible for, I'm talking about the Democratic Party, for really not tackling the key issues of the day and really leading to a situation where Trump came to power. Against, I think, a very creative young leader who wants to move the party in a direction where they can recapture the working class and create excitement and actually win elections at the local level and the national level. So welcome, 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 and thank you so much for what you do. And I can't wait to dig into some of this stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be on here and to meet you, Stephen, because you've done so much in your own career.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So tell us, some people know you, some don't. Just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and like what made you jump in to run for Congress, and on top of that, against none other than Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I mean, to go back, because you kind of captured my political career pretty well, but I grew up kind of apolitical in a middle class family, immigrant family in Texas, and I always grew up sort of with I don't know the vision of what of corporations and money controlling society and how we don't really have powers that are fighting for working people because of my family history. My dad grew up extremely poor in India. They grew up in sort of post-partition India. And I just grew up with all these stories of like overcoming poverty in the face of so much adversity, in the face of the powers that be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now like when I think about it, I think that's really where a lot of my values and my sort of mission maybe came from. But long story short, I worked in tech for a few years. Right after college, I worked in tech in San Francisco. That's what brought me out here in 2009. And I had a great time and it was fun to work on tech, but it was clear to me that tech wasn't really solving the big problems that I wanted to work on, right? I remember quitting and making a list. This is really cheesy when I say it, but I made a list of like I want to work on income inequality, poverty, and climate change. And at that time, Bernie Sanders started running for president. He was talking about this stuff. And he was, filling these stadiums with these huge rallies. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know if he had all the answers. I was apolitical, but I knew I had to go work for the guy and I had to do what I could. And so through that whole career in politics, working in progressive politics, I'd say I really came to this conclusion. I really got an up close look of like what's running our country, what's running our politics, and why the system is so broken and so rigged for so many people. And so, I've really worked behind the scenes trying to recruit people, trying to work on the ideas to get us out of that. And that's what I thought I'd be doing in 2024. But then after Trump won again, and I saw the Democrats' sort of response to that, call me naive, but I saw how they responded the last time. It was
Yeah.
completely, feckless and ineffective. I really thought this time they might have a come to Jesus moment where they're like, okay, we just lost a whole bunch of our working class base. We lost, a whole bunch of our, people of color, like black and brown voters base as well. Maybe we have to rethink how we're going about stuff. And then the reaction actually was, no, not at all. It was just the politics as usual, right? Like Democrats just took the strategy of let's lay down and play dead and wait for this backlash of Trump to build, and that's going to get us back into power. I mean, Pelosi went on an interview and explicitly said that. Like Pelosi got asked by, I think, Ezra Klein,
I remember
what did the
that.
Democrats, yeah, like what did the Democrats do wrong? What
That
should they
was that
change?
was it's like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But
That,
getting back to
yeah,
your
go ahead.
personal story, like how did you get interested in issues of poverty and income inequality? How did you develop in you the sensitivity to care about other people? And did that come from your home? Did it come from your education? Because I'm sort of feel like I'm the same way, and I'm actually writing a book about about my whole journey with the Chevron case, and I'm sort of thinking about a lot of the forces that shaped me, especially at a young age. Like, what shaped you such that you really wanted to care about these issues and jump into this type of work?
I mean, it is funny because so much of it just is there, and then actually running for office has made me start trying to introspect and try to figure out where it's coming from, right?
Yeah,
And when I think about it, I think it's like it's just having all these moments growing up where the kind of cruel randomness of poverty it becomes so clear. I mentioned my dad grew up really poor, right? But
hmm
my grandfather was a teacher. They were in Dhaka in Bangladesh when partition happened, and they had to flee overnight. And because
right.
my grandfather was a teacher, a bunch of his students
hmm
kind of warned him about some folks coming to like attack their house the next day, and so they fled. And this was, for people who don't know, partition was this hugely catastrophic event, right? It
Yeah,
was sectarian violence. Muslims and Hindus were both displaced. And I remember going back to the neighborhood in Calcutta that my dad grew up in. I was walking around with my dad, and so many people in that area. It's this huge, busy area. It's North Calcutta. It's like teeming with people and business. But people would recognize my dad and call out to him from the streets and be like, your dad gave me a chance in life, which was so amazing to hear. But the flip side of that made me realize like my dad was one of the few guys who made it out, and
right.
there's nothing it had, of course, he studied, he worked hard, but so did so many people there. And it's just when you have a society that's so unequal, where there's just a little bit of opportunity, that's available for the vast majority of people, it is random. It's set up so that only a few people can only ever make it, and that is so unfair. It's so unjust, right? And it's just broken. I think actually, if you set up a society like that, and that's the society I think we're headed towards more and more, that's a society that's just like doomed to fail. You
Right.
can't have this lottery system of a society, and I had a similar experience, working in the tech industry. Like it's a startup lottery, right? And like you have a few people who can really make it big in tech, but at the same time as living in San Francisco and just watching how more and more people are getting evicted from their homes and
Right.
rents are going crazy and people can't even afford to buy a house or have a secure retirement. So I don't know. At some point, I'm just like, this is unfair. Doesn't everybody feel this way, right? Like, it just seems so obvious.
Well, I'm really happy that happened. And just out of curiosity, what kind of tech work did you do when you were working in tech? And did you find it at all satisfying, even temporarily?
Yeah, I came out to tech kind of in that era where tech was being pitched as like the way to solve the big problems in the
Yeah.
world, and I was naive. I was right out of college, so I worked at Stripe early on, which is a fintech company, and I'd say, yeah, the actual work was fun. Like it's fun solving problems,
Right.
building tools, working with smart people. But I will say, after a couple of years. I was I didn't think I was necessarily solving the world's problems or doing whatever I thought I would be doing through tech, and that's a large reason why I left.
So, okay. So fast forward to sort of you deciding to jump into this race against Nancy Pelosi. Um, wow. I mean, first of all, I obviously live in that district. Did you move to that district with the idea that you could run against her, or is it just sort of a coincidence? You're like living there and you want her to run, and you're like, I'm gonna go for it.
The latter more, because I
hmm
did move out here in 2009, and then yeah, I was out of the district for about 4 or 5 years working on Bernie and AOC. But I've always sort of considered San Francisco my home. I've been here about 10 years of my adult life, and so after my stint with AOC, I moved right back, about 6, 7 years ago. So it wasn't with the idea of running against her. If I wanted to move to a district to run against somebody, I could have probably picked an easier target than Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, yeah. But hey, when I see this race, I think of Eric Cantor.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't he Speaker of the House when some unknown dude
Yeah, Dave
dislodged
Pratt.
him? Yeah.
Yeah, and that happened. It's sort of funny. That happened like I think the election cycle before AOC won.
Yeah,
And when AOC won, our initial thought was, oh, this will be as big as when Eric Cantor lost. But if
yeah.
obviously it turned into something way bigger than that, right?
Right,
We
right.
were not prepared for
Well,
it.
listen, there's something about this setup of you and your energy and vision against Nancy. I think you can win this race. That's not
Oh,
based on
absolutely.
any data, any metrics. I haven't seen in one damn poll. I don't even know if there is a poll. Like, I have a feeling you can win this race. I have a feeling you're going to win this race. I really do. There's something in the air in this country, and there is no greater symbol of the what I would call the, oh, you say fecklessness, just the lack of vision and energy of the Democratic Party at the elite level than, I mean, than Nancy. And I mean, obviously Hakeem Jeffries
Yeah,
too.
I
So
mean,
like there's a lot of people who, in my opinion, are not really doing the job that needs to be done. So I think you can win this race, but that's based on a gut feeling. Tell the audience like how you get there. Like you obviously need to raise money, you know, tell us how you see this playing out, over the next several months up to the point of I guess the primary and then the election.
yeah, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I could win this race. And a big reason why I did jump in, even against someone like Nancy Pelosi, is when I look at the moment of change right now, because I ran all these races in 2018, ran AOC's campaign, and there are actually a few other races I was running back then too, ran Cory Bush's first run. And there was this appetite for change. Trump had just won. Democrats were really upset at the Democratic Party. Like Democratic voters were upset at the party. They're looking for what comes next. And in my view, tactics and all that, they matter. But what really matters is if you have the right candidate in the right moment with the right message. And that's what
Right.
AOC was in that moment. But the appetite for change I'm seeing now completely dwarfs what I saw in 2018.
Yeah.
People in 2018 there's still some feeling of maybe Trump winning was a fluke, and we're going to get back to normalcy after. But now it's so clear to mainstream Democratic voters that the establishment has completely failed, and you see it in the polling. Like the Democratic Party polls underwater with Democrats. And so the strategy for this campaign in some ways is really simple because what we're learning is if I just get the message out, if I talk to voters, we're already door knocking. If you talk about, what I'm running on and who I am, the fact
Right.
that I actually have political experience, I have experience getting big ideas done, the kind of change that we need to have right now, getting big ideas to go somewhere, that's what I've worked on, with the Green New
Right.
Deal. 9 out of 10 voters on the doors at least are saying, "Oh yeah, I'd vote for you or I'd consider you," right? And these are lifelong Pelosi voters. I do voter calls every day. So every day on Zoom, instead of doing big donor calls, anyone can go to my website and sign up for a virtual town hall with me. And they're small calls, like 5 to 20 people on each.
Hmm.
And most of the people on those calls, they're not progressive activists. They're lifelong Pelosi voters trying to figure out what's coming next. What's the
Where
answer?
this is all going.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And so
the fact they're open to you and are jumping on these calls tells you something.
So that's why, at the end of the day, I just have to get the message out in front of every single San Francisco voter. That's the strategy, and that's through social media, that's through door knocking, that's through creative ways of getting in front of people, by doing podcasts, national media. Another benefit is because I am running against Nancy Pelosi, I get national press attention, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a symbol of the larger fight, or not the larger kind of struggle that's happening in the Democratic Party that everybody's interested in talking about, which is what comes next. This party seems decimated. What are we going to do about it?
Well, so on that point, I mean, it seems like the mission for America, which I know you had a great deal to do with, and you can maybe talk a little bit about the origins of that and the sort of the organizational muscle behind that. But it just seems to me that that's a plan. I mean, holy
Yeah.
smokes! Excuse me. Okay, I'm talking just as a damn human being watching when Biden was in power. Project 2025 was being written, and like people didn't take it that seriously until toward the end. And Trump was like, it's nothing. And like, you see now that what is actually happening to this country, like what I would call the march toward authoritarianism or even fascism, was written out and is being implemented in that plan. And
Yeah.
whether one agrees with that or not, I find it utterly astounding that the Democratic Party never had a plan to do shit. Okay, they never had a plan to govern. It was just
Yeah.
vote for us. I mean, I think Kamala's main message was we need to protect our democracy. But if people aren't benefiting from the democracy, if the democracy is so hollowed out by corporate influence and, you know, oligarchical power, like, so what?
Right.
And, and it really, in my opinion, just paved the way for Trump to come in and I think fraudulently convince working class people that he was for them. But it was only because the Democrats, in my opinion, left the opening. Your
Yeah.
plan, the mission for America, to me, is maybe the only real comprehensive plan out there about that, that could sort of take on Project 2025. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and I think that's really important, not just in your race, but really for every race. That is a really useful sort of plan to revitalize the entire Democratic Party, or alternatively start a whole new party around it if the Democratic Party is so unable to adjust. So talk a little bit about the plan and what you're telling people in your district.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about the plan, because my view of it is exactly what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people have been having it harder and harder for about 40 or 50 years now. Wages have been stagnant for a lot of people, while the costs of, healthcare, childcare, the essentials are
Right.
going up. And that to me is a fundamental reason why people are voting for bold, sweeping economic change any chance they get. I
Yeah.
think that's what people thought they're voting for with Obama. That's what people thought they're voting for with Trump, and they're going to keep doing it. And so the mission for America, it really harkens back to how did we turn stuff around before? Because we've gone through phases when our economy has been really, really stuck. Every modern day rich nation has gone through phases where their economy is really stuck, and they embarked on these big projects to transform everything. I'd say the last time we really did it was FDR, through the New Deal and also through the mobilization for World War II.
Yeah.
And that, what FDR did was exactly what we have to do today. Because there was a strong right wing movement back then. We had these huge Nazi rallies in Madison Square Garden, right?
Yeah.
And FDR destroyed that movement by proving democracy can
Yeah.
work to deliver for people. And so the Mission for America takes really a lot of the old lessons from how did we retool and rejigger our economy. At that point it was for war, but we can do it for other stuff. We can do it to build the clean economy that we know we have to build, right? And if you look at the history of the 20th century, there's basically every rich country today went through these phases where they completely rejiggered and upgraded their economies and created, social democratic welfare states that provided prosperity for so many people. So the Mission for America is really a plan to do that. The mission is to build a clean economy, not just for America, but to build all the clean goods and technologies that the whole world needs right now. But through that process, we have to basically upgrade every single industry in our economy, which is going to create tons of high wage jobs, tons of wealth, reindustrialize the Midwest. And that to me, it's hard. It's a lot harder than just slapping some tariffs on. But that I think that's where the point we're at. We actually have to do it, and it absolutely is a long-term plan. We were trying to pitch this to the Democratic Party and to donors and stuff before I was running for Congress. And one thing I really learned is the Democratic Party establishment is not interested in long-term plans. Everyone's always thinking of the next election cycle, whereas the Republican Party, they do long-term planning.
Yeah.
They've been planning the Supreme Court takeover for decades.
Yeah.
They've been planning,
I
they
just read.
basically started.
I just read
Yeah,
a book about that by Sheldon Whitehouse called "The Scheme." I don't know if you've heard. It's one of my favorite
yeah.
books I've read in recent years. Let me ask you a question though. Like, do you think the current version of the Democratic Party leadership? I'm talking about Schumer, Jeffries, Pelosi by virtue of her, past speakership. Um, is that crowd capable of adjusting and adopting backing the kinds of policies that are in the it's called the Mission for America, right?
Mission for America, yeah.
Or do they all need to go?
They all need to go. Yeah, they're not capable and they're not believable because there's two parts to this. One is
Mm-hmm.
they're not interested. Like it's really hard to convey to people just how uninterested our Democratic Party leaders are in actual ideas and planning or doing anything that's trying to figure out the real solutions to real problems. That's not what they think their job is. They think their job is fundraising, right? But the other part is they're seeing if somehow we snapped her fingers and magic struck and Hakeem Jeffries was like, yeah, we're gonna do the mission for America, no one would believe him, right? Like they're seen as corrupt and a part of this
Totally.
rigged political and
There's
economic
no,
system.
you know what it is? It's so funny. So when Trump came in, it was like a month in, everything was going haywire. I mean, you think it's bad, it's just bad. And I had this friend in Scotland, like a really smart young guy, and he said, "Are the Dems like, what are the Dems doing, like, to fight this?" And I sort of thought about it, and I answered by saying, "Well, they really have nothing to work with."
Yeah,
And what did I really mean by that? Like years and years of like hollowing out the party so they don't defend the working class. You know, Biden and Kamala run a campaign where they don't even advocate for raising the federal minimum wage or raising Social Security benefits, like basic stuff that
yeah,
everyone could get their arms around. Okay. Um, when it comes time to deal with a crisis, which is really what we're facing now with Donald Trump, where he's really undermining what's left of our democracy, seizing dictatorial power, trying to and really having quite a bit of success doing so. Like what you need is like a robust labor movement. You need unions. You need people who can hit the streets. You need millions of people in the streets. Think of the Yellow Vest campaign in France. Okay.
right.
You need to have a national strike. And, you know, with all due respect to Bernie and AOC, because I know they're doing the anti oligarch tour and they're generating, or they were, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they're generating a lot of interest, a lot of bodies, a lot of energy. But there's no, in my opinion, a lot of that gets dissipated because there's no place to deposit it in terms of creating political capital for the future. Is people fucking really angry in a given moment, given day, but where is that all going except back into the party with this failed, and I would argue, sold out leadership for the most part? And I don't want to slam everyone in Congress because it's complicated. I get it. But the structure of the system right now, in my opinion, is such that it is extremely difficult to advocate, um, for these types of policies and not get quashed by
Yeah.
money, and Gaza
It
being the perfect example. What happened to Corey and Jamal Bowman?
it's
So
at the end of the day, it has to be, a big part, like I talk about this with the campaign, but when I beat Nancy Pelosi, there's going to be this moment where
yeah.
the entire country's paying attention, right?
Oh yeah.
And my goal is I'm going to use that moment to call for people to run against Democrats and Republicans all over the country. I think we've got to go into 2028 with like hundreds of people because I did the Tea
Hundreds.
Party thing. I did the Tea Party thing in 2018.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. We can't push the party somewhere. We have to completely replace a majority of the people in the party, the leadership, and it has to be around a real plan to fix things. I think that's how you create
Do you
that
think
movement.
do you think had you had this plan in 2018 that you would have had more success? I mean, just so people know, Shoykot did the Justice for Democrats. The idea was to run was people, I think, in every election, right? To sort
Hmm.
of remake the party with progressive young energy. AOC won. Was Cori Bush that year too, or was she before that?
Cory Bush didn't win that year, but she did run that year.
Okay,
Yeah.
she won the next cycle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So talk us through that because I love this idea. Okay, so you're one race. Let's say you do beat Nancy Pelosi. How do we replicate that um, nationwide? And I want to just point out, like you said something earlier that I think is really important. I think we see this in New York City with Zoran Mandami, which is like the talent of the person really damn matters. Like you're
Hmm.
obviously a talented guy, you're obviously a nice person and highly intelligent. You know the policy, okay? And no one thought Zoran had a chance when he announced, but actually no one thought Barack Obama had a chance when he entered the open Senate seat in Illinois. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, Obama is an example of a person with a hell of a lot of political talent who rose above on the merits of the quality of the person, his ideas, his integrity at the time. I know people have different views of Barack now, but I'm just saying back then he was seen as the superior candidate in that field and he won. Okay. I think
Yeah.
Zoran, no one, very few people knew Zoran when he started. he campaigned and people got to know him and he was seen as the superior candidate and he won. You know, I think the same thing is likely to happen to you. How do we find hundreds of people around the country in a world where people are not encouraged to do this work because it's so distressing and
Yeah.
the system's so rigged? People, I know so many talented people who want to do what you're doing, either don't know how or just like I can't do that. I'll never attract the the fundraising I need to be competitive because of my views. I mean, it's just unbelievable. What's your recommendation to young people who want to get into this and do what you're doing?
Well, so I've got a recommendation for people who just want to start running, but I do want to pitch an idea of how this works if we get hundreds of people. Because,
Okay.
the real inspiring part of running Justice Democrats was, yeah, people like AOC and Cori Bush, they're politically incredibly talented, and they're amazing. But they weren't the only ones. If you go around the country and try to recruit people, there are amazing people in
Yeah.
every district. They're way better than whoever's in office right now, right? So it's actually possible. And often, I think if you get like normal, talented leaders who don't come in with all these preconceived notions of what donor am I going to offend, they're able to speak clearly. I think that's what you got a little bit with Zoran, right? Like he didn't have a bunch of special interests he needed
Right.
to, kowtow to. So he just said stuff clearly and plainly and it hit.
Yeah.
And that's what people do. But, the idea here is you're absolutely right that those people, because I tried to get those people to run in 2018, they never want to run because usually it's running is hard and you get a bunch of mudslung your way. You don't want to go through that, and you're usually doing something that's already very impactful. So why give that up and
Right.
go do send yourself into this doom march of potentially losing, right? But if we had hundreds of people running, the idea was, what if we had a central infrastructure, right? Like we actually ran it like a presidential campaign. And the idea you're really pitching to the American people is if all these people got elected, all the popular stuff we want to get done would get done. Medicare for all would happen. Raising the minimum wage would happen, right? Here's a choice on the ballot to just have all that happen. And so then you're raising money and you're running the whole thing as a movement. And, in my experience, that's how you convince people to run in the first place. Because you're not
Yeah.
telling them go be
You're
a
part of
politician.
something. You're not
You're
just
part of
isolated.
something. You're
Yeah.
going in to solve problems. You're going into work. You're not
Well,
going in to be a
let me ask you
politician.
this. Is there any, I know Justice Democrats did that in 2018.
Yeah.
Is there anyone doing it now? Is there anyone out there trying to recruit progressive young voices like your voice to run in tons of districts around the country?
Well, that's something I'm trying to do right now with the campaign.
Okay.
So there's a section on my campaign that says "Run with me."
That's your side gig, right?
That's my side gig. Yeah. So yeah, I am asking
Yeah.
people, especially when I, talk to folks on podcasts like yours, right? I'm saying nominate amazing leaders in your community on my website. I have a little tab on there that says "Run with me." So nominate folks. Justice Democrats also does still exist, but they've gone to a model where they kind of target a few districts every
Right.
cycle. But I really think the opportunity in front of us is going to be to go big. I think we're going to get this chance because things change so quickly in our politics today. I think when people really see that Trump has failed to turn the economy around for working people, Democrats are going to have this huge opportunity to say, "What's our pitch?" Right, and that's the opportunity we gotta pounce on.
Yeah. Do you, so I have to ask you this because and I admire you for like sort of working within the Democratic Party and trying to make it a more progressive, pro working class party. Is there any argument that a lot of this energy would be better used if a non two party structure were to be created? There's lots of talk about this, and I get it. I know our whole political system is essentially rigged against third parties.
Yeah,
Um, but at some point, you got to pull the plug. I mean, the Democratic Party has not gotten the job done. I mean, my personal analysis is so dependent on corporate money that anything like why wouldn't the Democratic Party leadership do what you did and write Mission for America? Why? Because like the corporate donors would hate it. And they would
yeah.
assume that if they wrote that, they wouldn't get money and they wouldn't get reelected. So at some point, you got to pull the plug. Tell my audience, why. And I know what I just said is true. So how do you then go back into the party um, and work within that structure when it just so many people seem so hopeless? By the way, I'm not judging you. I admire you,
Yeah, no,
but I want you
I
to answer that question because I think a
I
lot of people are thinking
completely
that.
agree with you.
Yeah,
I want to be clear. I'm not talking about going in and working with the Democratic Party. I think the party is a vessel, right? It's
yeah,
just it is the people who run it who are in there. And I think we got two options. Either we can try to recruit hundreds of people to completely take that over, so then it's a new thing, and we sort of saw Trump do this to an extent by
yeah.
himself in the Republican Party, right?
You
I
did,
don't
you
think we should
did.
do it with the cult of personality, but imagine if we had hundreds of people, then it is something else. Or we're talking about a new party, and we looked into trying to start a new party for brand new Congress, which was the predecessor to Justice Democrats. It's just logistically really,
No,
really
I know.
hard. It's you're now asking for 10 new problems. So I think at the end of the day, the project is how do we get hundreds of good people not bought out by corporations to be running Congress, right? To be running the government. Whether that happens through the Democratic Party or a third party, who cares? I just think the easier route because we have the infrastructure, the thing already exists, the party's on all the
Totally,
ballots.
totally,
That's what you do.
totally reasonable answer. I really want a viable third party, but I get it. It's hell. It's really difficult in this country. So, do you face a crowded primary field, or how's that part of your campaign looking?
Yeah, no, it's no one else wants to run against Nancy Pelosi. So
I
it's
would
just
assume it
yeah.
wouldn't be very crowded.
Yeah, it's not crowded. It's me and her, and there's always a perennial Republican that runs here. So there's one of those.
Is she paying any attention to you yet, or acting like you don't
No, and I
matter?
love it. I love running races against incumbents that don't campaign until it's too
Right.
late.
Well, what did she win by in the last election? I'm just curious.
She always wins by a lot. I mean, she didn't have a real challenger in the last election. She did have a progressive challenger a couple elections ago. There's a guy named Shahid Buttar who ran, and I think he got like 25%. I want to say I don't want to be misquoting it, but he didn't get very much. But I will say I think it was part of what makes this race possible was just the time, right? Like running against Nancy Pelosi 2 years ago or 4 years ago, I
Yeah,
think would have been
now's the
a
time.
serious uphill battle. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
now's the
and
time.
and the other
People,
thing is, people in the district, one thing they do respond to is she's no longer speaker. She's actually one of the only she's the only member of Congress who's not on a committee. So she's not even doing the work. She hasn't done a town hall. So there's kind of that sense of what is she doing now if she's no longer
she's not on a
Speaker of the
committee
House.
because she. Why would someone not be on at least one committee?
It's basically once you're Speaker of the House, you don't, what do you
No,
do?
that
You kind of
that
like,
looks
you
like
become
a.
CEO, right? You
Yeah,
don't
right.
demote yourself. So she's just kind of retired.
So what does she do? When she's in Washington, is she sort of an ear for Hakeem Jeffries? I know she sort of cultivated him, and what does she do in
That's
Washington?
the idea. I think she's kind of playing this role of a mentor to Hakeem Jeffries, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't really seen her around other than I saw her at a party with Jeff Bezos, I think, a few months ago, but really not sure what she's doing.
What's your impression of Hakeem Jeffries, just out of curiosity?
I think Hakeem Jeffries is just, he's a Democratic Party political creature, right? And this is, I think, the entire problem with the party overall. The whole party, the only thing they can imagine that wins elections is money, right? And so they're just addicted to having to talk to big donors. And anytime the big donors start going away, they start freaking out. And that's why Hakeem Jeffries, I think he sees his big job right now as getting the big donors back into the Democratic Party. And they just can't imagine any other way of winning a race, right? Like they can't imagine a big mass movement that's exciting that actually propels the Democrats into victory. Even though that keeps happening in other races, even though that's kind of how Donald Trump won, he got massively outraised in 2016 and he still won. So I think Hakeem Jeffries is just I mean, I think he's also doing probably a poor job of it, but he's just sitting there trying to be the leader that makes the Democratic Party inoffensive enough to the big donor class to try to woo these big donors, back to the party as if they would when the other option is they get massive tax cuts with the Republicans.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, I in this moment, when Donald Trump is taking this country, toward the most authoritarian governing model possible, and they just sit there. I mean, I get it. They speak out against this and that, but it almost seems like they're waiting around for the midterms, and then they think they can correct some shit. In the meantime, he's
Yeah,
doing everything he wants to do, and like we might be in full blown fascism by the midterms.
it's like The best way to think about the party is there's just no strategy at all other
Yeah,
than go for the next buck. And like I remember I used to go to these they would have these chief of staff meetings every Friday where all the Democratic chief of staff would come together. And I thought these were going to be the big, strategy meetings where we like figure out how to fight back against Trump. And it was like, did you guys fill out your, reports that we sent out last week? We got complaints that there's too many staffers in the members elevators. Like it was total like office space, big corporate shit going on. It's absolutely
that was
wild
when
talk. So surreal.
you were
That
like
was when I
chief.
was chief of staff. Yeah.
How did you like that job?
It was fun doing the Green New Deal stuff. It was really fun I mean, that whole moment was so much fun. But, part of the reason I left was at after, a few months of really shaking things up, getting some ideas out there, it started to become clear that we were starting to reach the edge of how much we could do with one member of Congress.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I've got to get back out, work on the outside, try to get more people in there, try to work on the ideas
I love
here.
that. I love that. You're an outside pressure guy. You totally have that vibe. I know that about you. Do you think AOC should run for president?
I think so, but I don't know. I mean, it's her decision. It's hard for me to like give advice to her either way from the outside here because she's so incredible and she's so talented, but I've also seen up close how tough it is to be in that kind of pressure cooker for her. So I feel like it's a her
I think
decision.
she does a great job handling everything that's thrown at her. And I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, she's also famous, so she's got to deal with that every day. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and I gotta say, now that I'm running for office, and I sometimes go back and watch the videos of, her going on Colbert and
yeah,
speeches she gave right after she won. I was like, my God, how did she come up with that stuff on the spot?
I
That was
know.
incredible.
Talented. So, do you? I think a lot of people would love your opinion about this. Like, who do you see leading the Democratic Party in the next presidential election?
It's so hard to tell this far out because it might be someone from completely the outside, and I think the way I think about it is I think everyone always focuses on this question of like who's going to win. And I really care about who's going to be the person that when they win, they're actually committed to turning things around. 'Cause I
Right.
think that's the real challenge, right? And I think if you go back to like the 1932 election when FDR won, he won on like the 40th ballot or something in the
Yeah.
Democratic primary. He was a total dark horse candidate. No one, I think if you had asked anybody, this is FDR going to be the guy that really like sets the country in a completely new economic direction path, people wouldn't have believed you. He was the governor of New York, but not taking that seriously. And and so he kind of like in that moment became a leader. So who is that? Who has that inside of them? I really don't know.
What do
And
you think of Gavin Newsom? And let me explain what I mean by that. Like, obviously, he seems to want to position himself to run for president.
yeah.
Fair enough. He is probably the most outspoken Democrat with a national profile right now. With the redistricting issue in California and just mocking Trump and actually taking him on. And you live out there. Like, what's your take on Gavin's what he's doing and his viability to actually lead the party in the next election?
The thing with Gavin, I mean, he's politically smart, like I
Mhm.
think he absolutely, and they've got to give him credit for that. Like he's realizing that in this moment, you've got to fight Trump and actually do real action to do it. So I think that's something, right? I think it's hard for me to see Gavin as not being like a messaging and positioning guy, if that makes sense. He's the
Yeah.
kind of person who's always trying to figure out what's the right message, what's the right position. Is he going to be the one who really like sets the country on a mission to like fix everything? I don't know. I mean, maybe if he realizes that's the best thing for Gavin, then maybe he would. But it's hard to imagine and it's hard to imagine him really taking on corporate interests because he's had a lot of chances to do that in California, and he's usually shied away from it.
Do you think that's interesting? Thank you for that. I'm sort of contemplating his viability in my own head a lot these days. What do you think of the Zoran Mandami model to get elected? Number one, and do you think number two it's applicable to your race? And number three, do you think it's applicable on a national scale to Democrat? I mean, obviously districts are all different, and I get New York's pretty progressive. But does it have national applicability?
Yeah, this is sort of the basic premise of something like the Green New Deal or the Mission for America is the stuff we're actually talking about. And if you actually poll the positions that Zoran ran on nationally, don't poll Zoran, but poll the stuff he's talking about. It does incredibly well all
Yeah,
over the country. It's all overwhelmingly popular stuff, right?
right.
And it's one of the things that kind of bugs me whenever people try to frame, when people talk about like the progressive versus moderate fight in the Democratic Party, the implicit thing that people take from that is like, these like unpopular progressive fringe things versus like the thing everybody wants. But really, the practical popular stuff is the progressive stuff,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
and so yeah, absolutely. I think the way if you don't want to win elections by just going and kowtowing to big money like the Democratic Party does right now, you have to win elections by presenting a plan that'll solve people's real problems with real solutions. That's exciting. That'll get, a mass movement of people on your way. That'll get a bunch of people to vote your way. And
What's
that to
your
me is the Zoran model, right? If
Yeah,
anything.
I think you're totally right. I think that's the model to run on. But I'm curious because Bernie sort of ran on that model in 2016. I operate on the theory that Bernie actually would have won that election had it been a free and fair election. I'm talking about the primary part of the election where I felt like the whole Democratic Party, Hillary and, others were trying to distort the rules to put him at
Right.
a disadvantage. I know you worked on that campaign. Looking back on it, do you think Bernie got screwed? And if he hadn't, he might have actually been president?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I do think like in some ways he got screwed. There's so many like I know there's the super delegates thing that people talk about, but more than that, like the way I saw it was the Hillary Clinton machine had such a tight control on the party. It's hard for us to hire anybody, right? Like
Yeah.
we couldn't find people to hire. It was hard to we had trouble getting access to like DNC tools. So it's like hard to know in retrospect which of those things would have made the difference in the primary. I do think he would have won the general, in that election. It was a populist election, it was a change election, and
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton was the absolute worst candidate for that
Worst
moment.
candidate. I mean, Bernie would have been able to take on Trump, you
Absolutely.
know?
I mean, how amazing would those debates have been,
Oh
right?
my God. Yeah. And so interesting is, you know, looking back on the experience of working with Bernie, and being a young person who cares about politics, like, how do you see Bernie right now? You know, what is the meaning of Bernie in America? Because like I love the guy. Don't agree with everything he's doing, but he's he just came out of nowhere. This independent senator from Vermont, and like created a massive energy force in this country, and it's been still going.
Yeah.
So how do you see Bernie, and how does he what does he mean in America to America right now?
You know, I think Bernie recognizes that his role at this point is to try to cultivate sort of the next generation of progressives and give them a platform. And he's doing a bit of that with the Fighting Oligarchy tour. It started originally with just him going around. And I was worried when I saw that because I was like, uh-oh, this is going to be a Bernie show.
Yeah,
But it was really good to see him start to bring others in on that and try to use this platform to, he's out there campaigning for Abdul. He obviously, campaigned for Zoran. And I think he's so popular. He's the most popular politician in the country. And part of why I think he is popular is he's sort of this people see him as a version of what could have been, right? It's
yeah.
like this kind of rose tinted glasses in a way, right? And so I think he's got to figure out how to turn that into a movement. Now, I don't know if that's Bernie's strength necessarily. Like I don't think he's if I have any critique of Bernie, and obviously I love the guy, right? And I work for him, is I don't think he ever quite managed to turn Bernie into a real political movement, right?
Okay,
Like a real political
can I
revolution.
tell you something? Because you're young.
Yeah,
If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 39.
You look younger, but you probably weren't born when maybe you were when Jesse Jackson ran for president as part of the Rainbow Coalition, first in '84 and '88, and everyone said the same thing about Jesse Jackson, which is because he captured the imagination and created amazing coalitions across racial, ethnic, class lines, and people are like, what's gonna happen now? Like there needs to be some sort of movement built out of this. And actually, people said the same thing to some degree about Barack Obama and the
Yeah,
coalition he put together. And, you know, I don't know why, but it just seemed that it was really hard for Jesse Jackson or Bernie Sanders, Barack. I mean, I've got my theories about Barack, but it's like no one was able to really seem to like harness that in a really lasting, vibrant, vital way, such that the power to help working class people could continually be built outward and upward. It was just so based on a person. So I don't know why that's never happened. It sort of goes back maybe to our part of the conversation about why is there no third party, you know. But
Yeah.
it really disappointed me back in the '80s when I was like your age and really into politics. I'm like, this is it. We can make this shit happen. Obama, I felt hopeful, and Bernie hopeful, and Bernie's still kicking ass. But where does it all go? Where does that energy go? How do you harness it so you create a lasting structural force that can get the shit done? The
Yeah,
stuff
and
in
it's
the stuff in your plan, like it's got to get done. But without structure and without a structural force and energy and people, and it's difficult for one person to do that.
and that's one of the big motivations for when we did brand new Congress, when we did
Hmm.
Justice Democrats, we were really trying to not have it be about any individual. We're trying to pitch the team, and I really think that's still the approach. That's founding fathers. It was a
Oh
team,
yeah,
right? Like but there's so many elements to it. It's because it's not just these candidates, who are the people out front and delivering the message, but you need to have the intellectual infrastructure. That's how we started New Consensus, actually,
yeah.
back during the Justice Democrats days, because we said, yeah, there's nobody working on these kinds of plans. You need the people who are actually doing the work behind the scenes, recruiting people, recruiting the not just the candidates, but the staffers, the civil servants, the folks who are going
Oh
to
yeah.
operationalize this stuff. It's just way bigger than any one person to do. And I think that's part of the challenge. I don't think Bernie had his plate full just trying to be Bernie and, doing what he's doing. And I think it never turned. I mean, a lot of infrastructure came out of that, but it was sort of decentralized, right? It wasn't part of a unified movement that was working together.
And you mentioned new consensus. Tell the listeners what new consensus is and sort of how that fits into the work you're doing.
Yeah, so New Consensus was a think tank that my co-founder Zach Exley and I started around the same time we started Justice Democrats. And the idea at the time was, there's nobody talking about things like industrial policy. There's no think tanks working on this
Hmm.
stuff. There's no think tanks working on economic policies for how to actually intentionally try to decide where your economy is going to go. There were a few economists, people like Mariana Mazzucato and Joe Stiglitz, and who are all kind of working in their own bubbles. So the idea of New Consensus was it was in opposition to the Washington consensus, right? The neoliberal consensus. And we were trying to bring these economists together. And a lot of the early work that New Consensus did, which Zach largely was running at the time because I was doing Justice Democrats,
Hmm.
was a lot of the research and the work that turned into the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal was kind of a summary of, the larger work that New Consensus had done at the time.
Is the new consensus still producing policy stuff and reports and stuff?
Yeah, so New Consensus still exists. That's where I worked for the last 5 years, and that's where the Mission for America came out of. And
Okay.
yeah, so we're still that's my third project outside running for Congress and recruiting people to run for Congress. Is we have some staffers there who
So
are
you have
still
you have like
on
a
Mission for
major a
America.
major think tank behind you that you work with.
Yeah, well, I helped
Yeah.
start. Yeah, so
Yeah.
me and Zach, we still run that think tank. Yeah,
And Zach is also helping you run your campaign.
yeah, that's right.
I should tell people when my period of detention, 993 days, ended, at the hands of this crazy private prosecution that Chevron orchestrated against me after he won the pollution case in Ecuador. Zach visited me along with some other people to talk about me doing what you're doing, to jump in. And it's funny because it never really occurred. I mean, I've always like had a little bit of the political bug. You can probably tell by my questions, but it never occurred to me that I would actually do it myself. So that was really interesting to hear their perspective on it. I'm not saying that because I want to run for office, anybody. So just chill, okay? But
Well,
I really care about good people like yourself running. I mean, as an older dude, I get inspiration from your generation. I draw inspiration from this conversation. You know, the vision that you have and the courage to jump in. I mean, it's not easy, man. This is not easy. Okay. And by the way, I love the smile on your face because the only way to do it well is to have fun doing it. And I know you're going to have
Yeah.
fun. You're going to enjoy the process. How can people help you? I mean, you want donations, right?
Donations and volunteers, if
Hmm.
you live in San Francisco or the Bay Area, we are trying to build the largest field campaign that the city's ever seen. We've been doing these canvases every weekend. We've got 50 to 60 people showing up every Saturday, about almost a year out from the election, which is kind of unheard of. Like I've never seen that
So
before.
you're like you got people knocking on doors
Mhm.
already over you. Okay, and how's that working out?
I mean, it's working well. Yeah, it's getting bigger and bigger, and we're doing, community events. We're doing tabling out at farmers markets, the whole shebang, right? It's just every which way we can to get in front of people. But people can go to my website. It's shoikat.us, SAIKAT.us. You can donate, sign up to volunteer, and if you live in San Francisco, you can also sign up for one of those virtual town halls with me just to meet me, because that's another way I'm getting in front of people directly, right? And that's one way we're building the whole thing.
So you said your website really fast. Say it again a little more slowly.
Yeah, it's SAIKAT.us, shoikat.us.
Oh, that's easy enough. That's easy.
Yeah, as easy as my name.
Yeah.
But Steven, you should have run. I'm sorry to say.
Well, it's never too late, but
Yeah, you still can.
I had to get my life back in order. I mean, they took all my
I know. You had a
money.
lot on your plate. You had a lot on your plate.
But yeah, but thank you for that. Again, I'm so happy for you, and I want to stay involved. We'll have you back on the podcast. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think whenever I do shows like this, a lot of the time we talk about everything that's going wrong right now, right? But I just do want to say, like, the only reason I'm running and the only reason I'm doing any of this is I am really optimistic that this whole thing can change. Just the same way that everything became so dystopian so quick, that can flip on a dime, right? And that's really the vision, kind of what the motivation for me doing it is. Just we have to go big. It's not going to be one silver bullet. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but we need people to do it. And I would love, anyone who's watching this who's ever had a slight inkling that maybe it's time to jump in the race, please reach out to me. I'd love to
I'm
talk to
gonna
you.
I'm gonna do a post about you too on my Instagram, just so people know what you're doing. I mean, to me, this isn't just any race. Okay, this is a race where you can slay a good part of the problem. Just in one race. No disrespect to Nancy. I really don't want to disrespect her, but I do think we have a structural problem here with the
Yeah.
leadership, and I think we need young people like yourself to get in there and to like change the Democratic Party so we have a chance of taking the country back and really saving the country. So yeah, I'm with you, and thank you for all you've done up to this point. Thank you for your work with AOC, with the Green New Deal, with Mission for America, with New Consensus. You're really a talented guy. I'm just curious, are you kind of an amateur historian or did you study history? You seem to know a tremendous amount about the economic history of the United States.
It was really like once I started working on progressive political
You
work, I
you
just got
learned it.
really interested. Yeah, I got really interested in this
Yeah.
question of like how did countries get out of this mess?
Yeah.
Because it really felt like we're in a mess. And what do we do in the past? What can we learn from that? So yeah, I read a lot of history, but it's yes, amateur is the right word for it.
Is there any one book that really enlightened you tremendously about how countries can transform themselves to, better help their citizens?
The first book I read that probably really got me into this way of thinking was Bad Samaritans by Ha-Joon Chang, which really talks about the history of South Korea and a bunch of developing countries. So it's a wonderful book.
Bad Samaritan. That's a good title too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to read that one. Um, okay, what'd you major in college? I'm just curious. I swear, what hearing you talk, I'm like, I was like, this guy majored in history. I'm just curious. What'd you
No, no,
major
I
in?
was a computer science man. I was a total, tech nerd in college and math and science
So
geek
your
in
so
high
your your
school.
po- your political work really began after college when you're like in the workforce.
Yeah, after I left the tech industry, it really began with Bernie Sanders, and I was working on Bernie's campaign as the organizer of the technology director for the organizing team. So I was building a bunch of the tools that would help us organize, millions of people who want to volunteer around the country, and that's how I got into organizing. Because to build those tools, I had to organize to see what we actually needed, and that's where I got the bug.
Fabulous. Well, listen, thanks for your time. Everyone, this is really exciting. We're taking on Nancy Pelosi, none other than Nancy Pelosi. This young man. What's your website one more time?
It's Saikat.us, Saikat.us.
Okay. We're gonna stay on this. We're gonna follow it closely. We're gonna give you all the support we can with our platforms. We salute your courage and your vision, and we're gonna be watching with great interest. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Take care.